Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. I'm Ocean Robbins, and the interview you're about to see is with our guest, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Joel Fuhrman, MD, is a board-certified family physician and an internationally recognized expert on nutrition and natural healing. Through his wildly popular series of PBS specials, his 7 New York Times bestsellers, and the creation of the ANDI or Andy score to quantify the nutritional quality of food, Dr. Fuhrman has brought the message of nutritional healing and his Nutritarian approach to millions of people. He is president of the Nutritional Research Foundation, and he serves on the faculty of Northern Arizona University's Health Sciences Division. Dr. Fuhrman operates the Eat to Live retreat in San Diego, California, where people come from all around the world to lose weight and recover their health. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Fuhrman about corruption in the food system, about what it means to be a nutritarian, and about best practices for a healthy diet. Joel, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Looking forward to this.
All right, well, let's jump in and talk a little bit first about what's wrong with our toxic food culture. And I want to specifically ask you about what is the impact of added sugar on human health?
You know, it is a shame that we see so much needless human tragedy because how we've evolved to eat processed foods in a diet that's not well adapted to the human species. I don't think many people are raised with the idea that our body is disease resistant and already a miraculous self-healing body that doesn't have to have heart attacks and strokes and cancers and autoimmune conditions and all types of dementia. And the bottom line is that the modern world suffers tremendously because of widespread nutritional ignorance. And so we're starting out with in the United States, where 60% of the American diet is processed foods, which includes, commercial baked goods, like pasta, salad oils, mayonnaise, donuts, cookies, crackers, rice cakes, breakfast bars, chips, soft drinks. That's the majority of what people eat. We're talking about the idea of a plant-based diet. They have a processed food-based diet. The American diet is a processed food-based diet, which sets the framework for the inevitable consequence, which is serious diseases that permeate our society and create untold amount of human tragedy, both physically and mentally as well. And I'm saying that white flour is a sugar equivalent. So the question is, how does sugar damage people's health? We have to wrap that up with how does sugar and white flour, maple syrup, honey, agave nectar, all these maltodextrine, all the sugar substitutes that the processed food industry puts into their food. So they don't just say sugar, they have different names for it and different types of sugars. But the effect is whether you're eating a cube of sugar or a bagel or a pizza or a croissant or a piece of white Italian bread, the body bloodstream is flooded with a huge load of glucose. And that huge glucose load that comes in all at one time in an almost instantaneous has negative effects on the body and the brain. And so I call that terminology, I call it the caloric rush, referring to how many calories can we pack into the bloodstream in a short period of time in a 5-minute interval. If we're eating fruits and nuts and beans and vegetables and peas and carrots, you can't put that many calories in the bloodstream at one time because for numerous reasons, because the starches and the sugars are entering the bloodstream more slowly, and a favorable microbiome also slows the entry of sugar into the bloodstream when you're eating carbohydrates that are broken down into simple sugars. But when you're eating simple sugars without the fiber that are extracellular, not intracellular, not behind a fiber matrix, they're not attached to fiber, they come into the bloodstream instantaneously. they support the growth of an unfavorable microbiome that doesn't slow their entry into the blood. And the high concentration of sugar in the blood affects the brain as if you snorted cocaine or had a shot, because it affects the dopamine centers in the brain, the same dopaminergic centers that are affected by opiates. And the chronic exposure to this high caloric rush, particularly with glucose, makes you become dopamine insensitive and craving and desiring this hit, chronically hitting the brain with this bliss point of sugar that you could not achieve with natural foods. Now, the body can't effectively convert sugar into energy because to convert sugar into energy, glucose into energy, we need cofactors like vitamins and minerals. And also, reactive oxygen species are produced in the utilization of that sugar. So we need to diffuse the reaction of, we need antioxidants present in food, like we eat fruit. We have fiber and antioxidants and B vitamins present. So it enables us to utilize that sugar and turn it into energy. When we're taking in sugar without the cofactors, without the phytochemicals, and without the fiber, then you can be eating sugar, you can have a high amount of sugar in your blood, but your energy production is blunted, meaning you can still feel fatigued in spite of eating adequate calories. And because it's not shunted as efficiently for energy, you have increased apostat, and you also have more shunting of sugar into fat stores. So it revs up fat storage hormones. And the primary fat storage hormone is insulin. When you have this high amount of glucose in the blood, obviously you have the response is to produce a lot of insulin from the beta cells in the pancreas to bring the glucose back to normal again. So we have a natural spike of glucose, and now we have an unnatural release of insulin. And insulin itself is the primary fat storage hormone, which then stops the body from losing weight and revs up fat storage. And then insulin itself is a powerful pro-angiogenic hormone. It promotes angiogenesis. And the word angiogenesis means the growth of new blood vessels. So fat can grow because fat can't grow unless new blood vessels grow to bring nutrients and oxygen to the fat cells. So that's why insulin is a pro-angiogenic hormone. And this combination between the high level of the angiogenesis promotion and the high level of insulin promotes cellular replication and fat growth and cancer cell growth and cell replication in general. So we need that insulin to be high if we're going to promote cancer. And also in the same process, you're promoting fat growth. You're accelerating deposition of cholesterol on the inside of your blood vessels as well and producing more visceral fat growth. So this high level of sugar in the bloodstream has a constellation of negative impact on the body, promoting shortening lifespan, making you fatigued in spite of adequate calories, increasing your appetite, making it hard to lose weight, and of course, shortening your lifespan in the process as it floods the body with more reactive oxygen species, which are a primary metabolic toxin that ages us.
Why is eating healthfully so difficult for so many people?
You know, we're touching on it here. There's a lot of different reasons we can go into, and obviously, you know, I've written books about this and have many hundreds of pages written, but just to summarize some of the highlights, is that eating healthfully is difficult for numerous reasons. One's the physiological reason, because when you start to begin to eat healthfully, you start to feel worse. You don't feel better. You start to go through withdrawal from the diet that's so addicting that people are eating. Because you imagine most people in America get 60% of their calories from processed foods and about 35% of their calories from animal products. And both animal products and processed foods do not contain phytochemicals and antioxidants. So the body builds up a lot of metabolic waste products, especially reactive oxygen species and advanced glycation end products. So we have these high levels of toxic metabolites in the body, and people start to eat healthfully. And now the body mobilizes these toxins when it's not digesting food so much. And you start to feel more fatigue and more irritable when you first change to a healthy diet. So people will feel, oh, I'm feeling fatigued. I need calories. I got to eat because I'm fatigued. And they don't realize, well, it's good you felt the fatigue because that meant you're actually withdrawing from or detoxing from the poor diet. Let me just explain this in a little more detail in that When you're digesting food and you're eating, the body is not repairing and healing. It's not detoxifying. It limits detoxification while you're eating. It's when you stop digesting food. It's when digestion is over that your body goes into a heightened stage of repair and healing and detoxification. So people, when they eat, they feel better, and when they stop eating, when repair and detoxification is enhanced, that's when they feel poorly. And their primary symptom of feeling poorly is fatigue. And when they eat again, the fatigue goes away, and they equate feeling fatigue with hunger, so they're driven to eat more calories than they need. So I'm starting to go into a small amount of the physiological response why eating unhealthfully, when you're eating unhealthfully, you need to eat more calories and you need to eat more frequently not to feel fatigue, number one. And so there's other biological mechanisms, but the other feeling is the person feels unsatisfied because they've been exposed to this caloric rush with too much oil and animal fats, which rush into the bloodstream too rapidly, as well as too much high glycemic carbohydrates like white rice, white bread, sugar, honey, maple syrup. So the combination, and even white potato to a degree, because of the rapid absorption of glucose into the bloodstream. So I call it the caloric rush because the person gets acclimated to such a heightened amount of calories in the blood. When they start to have a more normal amount of calories in the blood from a meal, like 400 and 500 calories. Now, don't forget, when you're eating 400 and 500 calories of natural plants with vegetables, beans, nuts, fruits, whole grains, those 400 to 500 calories come into the bloodstream gradually over a 3 to 4 hour period. So you gradually, that 400 calories are coming in a little bit every minute, a few calories a minute. But the processed foods and the animal fats and the oils come into the bloodstream almost instantaneously. You say from the lips to the hips in 5 minutes flat. So when you're pouring oil on your food, you're getting a flood of calories in the bloodstream that you could not achieve if you had the same amount of calories from walnuts or sesame seeds, let's say. Only from the sesame oil and the walnut oil. But you get dependent on this huge caloric rush. The brain gets dependent on that. And you don't feel like you're stimulated enough. You feel somewhat empty and unsatisfied. So an apple or a peach is not good for dessert. You have to have some ice cream or a chocolate bar or a protein bar or with 30 grams of sugar in it or some. You have to have something with more caloric concentration to feel you're satisfied because your body has been acclimated to this high amount of calories in the bloodstream, and it takes a while to be acclimated to a lower amount of calories. So we're talking about some of the physical reasons, but there's emotional reasons now as well why people overeat. And we're talking about because we're living in a society where everybody is eating in a self-destructive, addictive manner. So for you to be eating in a different way, it means that you're going to have to be outside of the social norms of society. And there've got to be a lot of reasons and a lot of internal self-esteem and emotional health and wisdom to be able to live outside of the social norms of society. And that takes another type of education, which we could talk about, but is not obviously a somewhat of a different subject. But so we need nutritional training, we need to understand human physiology, and we need to change our emotions and develop the wisdom and mindfulness to be leaders and to build our own self-esteem based on our goodwill for others and our ability to be a role model and not try to please others or impress others or fit in with common conventional norms. So a lot of factors interfere with people adoption of this.
Yes, thank you. Joel, who is profiting from the status quo around food, and who is really paying the price?
Yes, it's really a fascinating subject, isn't this? How it seems that there's a collusion between the food industry, the processed food industry, the animal product and meat industry, the drug industry, right? The pharmaceutical industry, hospitals, medical profession, and of course, government are all seem like they're all in collusion to, and the result, of course, is not just the human tragedy and disease, which then fuels the medical profession, the need for drugs, but it also makes people think less clearly and be more susceptible to, let's say, being led in the wrong direction. to not weighing evidence with science and logic, being more likely to be conspiracy thinkers or be led into irrational thought processes. And it definitely makes people more prone to anger and violence. We know that nutritional deficiencies affect the brain and make people more irritable and more prone to anger. And it actually lessens people's intelligence as well. I wrote a book called Fast Food Genocide, which discussed the impact of pellagra after the Civil War, and then how niacin deficiency leads to a disease that makes people more, angered, violent, prone to homicidal and even suicidal behaviors. And it wasn't until like 70 years later when they discovered this is a nutritional deficiency affecting brain function and behavior. And it wasn't until they started making prisoners eat vegetables that they started seeing less recidivism and people committing less crimes. And then we also have it going on today. And the reason I brought that up and bringing it up now is because we're seeing it reoccur in the modern world. We're seeing widespread nutritional deficiencies of not just B vitamins, but antioxidants, which affect brain function, and fatty acid imbalances in conjunction with that then lead to decreased neuroplasticity of the brain, abnormal brain signaling, more brain inflammation, and obviously people being more able to be led into more self-destructive and society-destructive behaviors. And by the way, the more you're a food addict and driven by, or a drug addict or an alcoholic, the more you're involved in self-destructive, addictive behaviors, the more your behavior becomes more narcissistic, because the primitive brain becomes the central governing body of your behavior, and the primitive brain wants what it wants. It wants to meet its needs for these substances, as opposed to your cerebral brain making all decisions. And a person, as you can imagine, being a heroin addict, can lie, cheat, steal, or hurt other people to try to get their heroin. But you could understand how powerful that urge is to get these addictive needs met, and how it competes with the urge, with the part of the human existence that have us care for and take care of the outside world, and have feeling for the nature and people and the planet and animals and things outside of ourselves. So it's appreciative, having gratitude for, being protective of, and having goodwill for the natural world that's outside of ourselves. But the more we become addicted to chemical substances, the more our internal life becomes the primary objective, and meeting our addictive needs overrides those, those external interests. So we become more narcissistically directed and less, we can say, and I like the term, to have creative goodwill for humanity and others. To use your creativity, intelligence, to have as much goodwill for others possible, because that gives you the most internally generated self-esteem. That's a healthy way to feel good about yourself, as opposed to collecting brownie points and have people like you and trying to, get power or feel superior to other people is an unhealthy way to go after self-esteem. And that's unhealthy way of going after self-esteem that drives most people's behavior in this country and the modern world, actually, and drives a lot of political thinking and political activity.
I'm thinking that a more resourced brain helps people to be more resourceful, that people who feel good tend to do good, and therefore this is how we kind of like our own personal health is actually an investment also in the well-being of our society, because when we feel better, we're able to do more good in the world and contribute meaningfully to the lives of others. Fascinating how motivation changes and capacity changes with the right fuel in the body.
That's so true, Ocean, what you're saying right now. And just think about this for a minute, because if you don't walk what you talk, if you don't, and you're not a good role model, and you're not representative of eating healthfully to others, they're not going to respect what you have to say. If you're worried about, oh, well, I'm at a party and I don't want to look different, and people are saying, well, why do you, if you're not a good role model in that you're healthy and you're an example of good health and you're actually practicing it, then you're not going to have the ability to have a positive effect on other people, and they're not going to respect what you have to say. So it all goes hand in hand. And the people that have that I know that have lost, let's say, 50 to 150 pounds and kept it off for 5 years or 10 years or more and are successful in living healthfully, they love living healthfully like I do. We find this we're so grateful for the opportunity we've had to learn this information. It gives us a happier life. We feel better about ourselves. And it gives us these superpowers to be able to have goodwill for others in a more powerful way than if we just were eating like the way other people were eating. So it gives us the power. So, and I'm saying that that's a necessary ingredient in people's ability to make this change stick and to make it easy, for them to develop the superpowers to be able to see that having a good effect on other people and having a good effect on the world around us is allowing, it's one of the beautiful assets or beautiful gifts of life that we have when we take better care of our health.
Do you have concern about the use of synthetic pesticides in agriculture? And can you tell us about their impact and about whether you think organic farming practices are beneficial?
Yes, well, right off the bat, I'm absolutely a strong supporter of organic farming practices and regenerative organic agriculture. We're talking about the beneficial effect it has on people, not just the people that consume the food, but the people that are actually doing the farming. Because the biggest exposure to damage and increased risk of cancer is people that have to farm using chemical pesticides themselves. And also the fact that they're destroying insects like bees and things in the earth and we're not getting the bacteria, the fungi, the insects that all add to the symbiotic relationship we have with nature. So absolutely, that's critically important. We're talking about living in a more mindful way. And the question is, when you eat food, we're having gratitude for the miraculous structure and wonder of food, which heals which um, fuels our immune function and enables our body to be disease resistant. And there's probably 1,000 nutrients in a strawberry, not just 10. There's 1,000 nutrients in there, half of them we haven't discovered yet. And our body interacts with those nutrients in a very deep and profound way. For example, the ergothioneine in mushrooms. Who knew that there's a receptor on the cell wall for ergothioneine that stabilizes the cell nucleus when we're exposed to these compounds found in mushrooms? And the whole thing is ridiculously impressive. You know what I mean? It's just like beautiful, the way we have this relationship with food. But at the same time, we're appreciating the food, how good it tastes, its wondrous qualities to heal us and protect us when we eat real organic food. We're also thinking about the people that raised the food, grew the food, shipped the food to us, how did we get that food on our plate, and all the people involved in having it make it, and their health and their well-being and their livelihoods are involved. So of course that if we shifted to organic farming, we wouldn't be putting the farmers and the food growing people at risk with their own health just to make an apple or a piece of corn. Because we're putting ourselves at risk, but we're also putting the people that make the food at a much greater risk when we're exposing them to pesticides in that process. So yes, there's a lot of reasons why. And there's also a connection between growing some of your own food and being connected to the growth of that food, even with picking it at a local farm or making your own garden, and longer life. So there's some innate emotional connection we have with growing and making food that's good for us in a biological way and also an emotional way. Maybe our hands in the soil, maybe being part of the earth, maybe being good to expose to the bacterial milieu of the various variety of bacteria exposure we get when we're outdoors. Maybe it's being in the red light from the morning sun, and the emotional connection we get from the earth when we're eating foods that we grew ourselves. All these things have a beneficial effect on human longevity.
Why does organic food cost more?
For numerous reasons, but the main reason is turnover in the stores. That right now the conventional produce is at a lower price, and people are going to buy more of the lower price food. So if everybody was buying organic, obviously more people were growing it, then there'd be more turnover and it wouldn't go bad as fast. So because it hangs in the store more, it's kind of a vicious cycle. Because it's a higher price, there's not as much of it. There's more conventional farms, less organic farms. There's not enough people wanting organic produce. so the produce stays on the shelf longer to sell it off the shelf. And then there's waste. There's also waste of the produce because let's say a strawberry that's organic doesn't have much shelf life. It doesn't have fungicides on it. It's going to get rotten. So you can't, if it's not sold out in 5 days, after it gets into the store, they have to throw it in the garbage. So it has more, there's more costs involved. It's not just farming it. It's all the costs involved with shipping it, protecting it during shipping, getting a fungus and having lower shelf life in the store so it doesn't go, so there's less, more waste. There's a lot of factors involved. But obviously, the more people that are eating organic and the more growers that are growing organic will obviously bring the price down. And as people eat foods that are more locally and not kept on transit as long, I mean, obviously, the more people that do this, the more effective it can, the more cost effective it could be. And keep in mind that between World War I and World War II, and even for almost a decade after World War II, the government advocated people grew a lot of their own food because they used to want it, they called it, I forgot the name of it, but they encouraged people to have home gardens because they wanted to save the food for the armies and for the soldiers across the sea.
Victory gardens.
Victory gardens, that's correct. And in those days, more than half the calories consumed in America were calories consumed that people grew on their own homesteads and own homes. And people, even if people, so people should grow some of their own food, even if they live in apartments. They should have a grow box. They should grow sprouts. They should grow microgreens. They could have but in any case, it is possible for much of America to grow more of its own food, and that would be a huge step in the right direction too.
I want to ask you a few more nutrition-specific questions now, Joel. Is there a value to eating dessert?
Yes, there is. I teach a certain structure in the way people eat. The structure, I feel that if they have this skeletonized structure down pat, it helps them remember to eat these foods every day, like have a salad every day, have some soup with some mushrooms and onion in there, have some berries with flax seeds and chia seeds every day. So I structure the diet so people remember what to eat every day. Like for lunch, for example, have a big salad every day with a dressing that's made with nuts and seeds, not with oil, because that will facilitate the absorption of the phytochemicals, make it taste great, but also lower your rate of inflammation, stabilize the heart against arrhythmia, and have anti-cancer protective effects. And you absorb 20 to 50 times more of the protective phytochemicals when there's some fat in the meal, by the way. So we're having some nuts, and maybe we'll have vegetable bean soup and some fruit. And then for dinner, they might have raw vegetables like jicama and snow pea pods and bok choy stems with a hummus or a salsa dip or an orange dip or all types of different types of healthy ways to make raw vegetables taste good. But then they're cooked vegetable dish, and then they have some cooked vegetables, and they have a dessert. Now, why eat dessert at night? And the reason dessert is so important, because we want people to go to bed on an empty stomach. We want them to, and in order to go to bed on an empty stomach, you have to stop eating before you got full. If you ate till fullness in your last meal of the day, it's going to take too long to digest that meal, and you're going to have food digesting and refluxing up your esophagus when you're sleeping at night. And when you're sleeping at night is when the body most effectively heals and detoxifies and repairs and does its stem cell maintenance and telomere maintenance. The longevity benefits are enhanced when you're sleeping and when you're not digesting food. If you're sleeping and you're digesting food, you're not getting the full longevity benefits of sleep. So we want people to finish digestion before they go to sleep at night. So what I'm saying here is that we eat a reasonable amount of food at dinner time. We feel satisfied but not full. And we choose to eat a dessert to stop the eating for the day, to mark the end of eating for the day, and to say to ourselves emotionally that this is it, I'm done. I had my dinner, even though I'm not full, and I had my dessert, which means I'm done for the day. Now I'm going to shut down the restaurant, shut down the kitchen, clean my teeth, pick or water pick or brush or floss, whatever you're doing, and then involve the rest of the evening with recreational activities that do not involve food. There's so many things we can do that's in the field of good emotional health to recreate and have fun with our lives after dinner without going to food or drink. And so that becomes the occupation of your evening, having emotional and relaxing and recreational activities that don't involve food, so you allow digestion to finish to go to sleep on an empty stomach. So eating that dessert actually helped you cut your calories down for the day and stop eating at the appropriate point so you can get maximum healing from your sleep at night.
Well, in light of you're talking about going to bed on not a full stomach, this is kind of related to intermittent fasting, which a lot of people are talking about these days. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, and do you think it has efficacy for some or most people?
Yes, we can talk about that. And we should also mention that the dessert that I'm recommending people eat is made as a healthy food dessert. It's not made with sugar and sweeteners and honey and maple syrup. It's made with something, we're taking a super healthy dessert that tastes great, an ice pop, made with carob and, and banana and cashew nuts and flaxseed and hemp seeds in there, make a carob fudgesicle pop or something. We're talking about a delicious, homemade, like we made like a little piece of fig bread with figs and little almonds, but whatever, in other words, we make a delicious dessert that's very healthy.
Yes, or we love homemade frozen sorbets where we'll put some unsweetened soy milk in the blender with some frozen bananas and fruits and maybe some vanilla extract. And
Yeah, I use real vanilla bean extract, real vanilla bean powder, not vanilla extract. If you don't mind me tweaking that a little bit, because real vanilla bean powder is a superfood with beneficial health effects. Where vanilla bean extract is really just a flavoring. So real vanilla bean powder for real vanilla, which is a great food. Okay, so let's get into that next part of the question about intermittent fasting. Because yes, when we're talking about time-restricted eating, which extends the catabolic phase to more hours between the stopping of dinner and the starting of the first meal of the day, that has beneficial effects, beneficial in slowing aging. And it helps have a beneficial effect in making you more or less more insulin sensitive, less insulin resistant. We're not supposed to be eating all day and night with such a large caloric window. So that's beneficial to people. However, and by the way, it's more beneficial to cut your dinner earlier and lighter than to eat late at night or heavier and then make and skip breakfast and start eating at lunchtime. So the benefits of intermittent fasting are enhanced when you eat an earlier and lighter dinner as your methodology of intermittent fasting and not skipping breakfast. You're better off getting hungry in the morning and eating earlier and cutting your calories back late in the day. But the other caveat here about intermittent fasting, juice fasting, water fasting, or that have some beneficial effects, is that it leads people who are food addicts into obsessing about food, and it can lead them to binge and to be a binge dieter and not develop consistency in their health habits and their weight loss and their achievement of a healthy weight and a body who's no longer desires self-destructive food behaviors. What I'm saying is that we get better results in the long term for most people, not for everybody. Every person's a little different, and I'm not saying there's one right way that blankets everybody. But most people do better if they don't try to insert 500 calorie days and water fast on the weekend and juice fast for a week, and that makes them more food obsessed in the fasting process, slows the metabolic rate when they start eating again, and increases the likelihood they're going to binge and overeat in the non-fasting phase. And it keeps them in this dieting mentality, and they don't really continue to gravitate slow and steady towards their ideal weight. Because I'm teaching people that the negative effects of being overweight, which increases insulin, increases estrogen, increases free radical and lipokine and cytokine, suppresses immunity, stops gene silencing, all these negative effects of being overweight that ages your body and increases your metabolic, your burn of your body's burning your engine at a higher speed, you're aging faster. All these inflammatory markers and hormones get improved while the overweight person is losing weight. The minute the overweight person starts to not lose weight or to gain weight, the inflammatory markers start to go up, the estrogen starts to go up, the insulin starts to go up again. But while the overweight person is steadily and gradually losing weight each week in the direction of their ideal weight, we see the markers improving and stay improved as they move in the right direction. So we don't want people to go so radical on their dietary approach with caloric restriction, let's say to 500 calories a day or intermittent fasting. And then they slow the metabolic rate, and then they'll stop losing for a month. And they'll gain back some weight because they slowed the metabolic rate. And the effect of the slowed metabolic rate and the fact that they're not losing anymore has a disheartening and negative effects on their positive thinking as well. And they start to cheat and go off the diet and give up on it because they went too far one way and then too far the other way. And they try to go the other way and they can't get the weight coming down steadily because they went too far one way. So we really, in most cases, recommend people do not do that. That doesn't mean I don't use fasting as a therapeutic tool with people with asthma, let's say, to help reverse the asthma, or a person with psoriasis who is eating right and to facilitate the resolution of psoriasis and have it go away. I can use it as a therapeutic healing modality, as a tool in my arsenal, but it's not routinely used for people trying to just get in shape and lose weight. Because too much, it has the potential to interfere.
Yeah, the psychological place where we get obsessed with food and then it takes over our lives. We're no longer the author. You want to help people be the captain of their ship when it comes to their food choices, not be swept away in stormy seas.
Absolutely. When people are food addicts, when they're particularly a food addict, it's consistency over time with the right behavior. And every day they do the same thing over and over again and go into the right direction. It builds their taste muscle. It builds their muscle of being able to do this and their positive thinking. And so so that's what we do here. We want people learn what to do that works for them, adjust the calories in the food appropriately, the timing of it, and then take it home and duplicate this perfectly for long periods of time. And don't keep bouncing back and forth with different ideas.
Joel, I want to ask you about something else, which is bovine dairy products, also known as dairy, and hormones. You know, we have a lot of hormone imbalances in our lives in the modern world. And how much of a factor do you think dairy is, considering that, you know, lactating mammals produce a lot of hormones in their milk, especially when they're given hormones daily?
Well, we know dairy does raise IGF-1 more powerfully than other animal proteins do. And IGF-1 is a hormone that in excess ages us and increases risk of cancer. So we want that level to be low. But I'm saying to you also that all types of concentrated animal protein, including dairy, not only raise IGF-1, but they shorten lifespan. So even though dairy theoretically is worse, when you actually go down to the longevity studies, they all have almost the same negative impact. So even though dairy has worse hormones, maybe red meat has worse something else. Maybe there's more, heterocyclic amines or polyaromatic hydrocarbons on the surface of the cooked meat. Maybe there's more saturated, so whatever it is, they're all negative to almost an equal degree. And one of the most fascinating aspects of nutritional science over the last 5 years was that higher levels of animal protein in the diet from almost any source had the same effect at shortening human lifespan and increasing both cardiovascular death and all-cause mortality. So it seemed like it didn't matter what the source of animal protein was. It was animal protein in general that had the lifespan shortening effect. Now, animal fats have a life shortening effect too, but I think it wasn't recognized sufficiently that white meat chicken, skim milk, egg whites, low-fat fishes, it wasn't recognized that the animal protein itself has lifespan shortening effects, especially when people cross a threshold of, where the IGF-1 starts to rise, which is usually above 10% of calories. But in any case, what I'm saying here now is that not only does increased protein, but particularly dairy products, which maybe has more negative effects in lower amounts, because we know that the countries with the most breast cancer and prostate cancer are the Scandinavian countries and the other countries with the highest amount of dairy consumption, particularly milk drinking into adulthood. Very, very negative effects on longevity. And then there's the effect of animal protein. Then there's the effect of plant protein on longevity. Because here's what happened in the field of nutritional science. People looked at diets looking at meat intake, and they tried to see if people cut back on meat, will they live longer? And we have all these studies that are claimed by meat advocates that cutting back on meat isn't making people live longer. And they have studies to prove it. And that's because when people cut back on meat, they eat more chicken, they eat more dairy, they eat more eggs, they eat more some other animal type of product other than meat, or they ate more high glycemic carbohydrates or more sugar or more processed foods. The diets weren't controlled for the other foods they were eating They didn't switch from meat to beans. They didn't switch from meat to vegetables. They switched from meat to anything else, and the studies don't show much benefit because the risk factors from commercial baked goods is just as bad as eating barbecue as eating meat. So now we're getting into more modern studies where they're following plant protein intake because plant protein isn't white flour, it isn't sugar, it isn't oil. There's no protein in oil, in plant fats. The protein is in the whole nut or seed, the whole bean, the whole intact grain, the whole vegetable. So we're talking about measuring plant protein. We're talking about looking at these intact plant foods that where the protein isn't, we're not just so that therefore we're talking about eating more vegetables, more beans, more nuts and seeds, and more intact whole grains increases the plant protein, and those are the foods that we replace the animal products in. We replace the animal protein with plant protein, and now we have more than 5 large-scale studies done in different populations around the world showing more plant protein foods lead to longer lifespan, which really solidifies our message that it's not just cutting back red meat and eating more white meat chicken. It's not, cutting back on putting more olive oil on our food. It's really the most powerful effect of extending lifespan is eating more intact whole plant foods that are protein rich. And by the way, the studies coming out of England where vegans had higher rates of hip fractures and more osteoporosis, these European and British vegans were eating a lot of oil and processed food in their diet because I analyzed the protein content of the diet of these high carbohydrate, high oil diet. And just think about this for a minute. If I put 30% of my calories in my diet from oil, well, I just removed 15 grams of protein out because I could have had the same amount of calories from eating sunflower seeds and almonds. And, my fat could have come from sunflower seeds and almonds, and I could have put 15 grams of protein to get that many calories. So the more you oil up your diet, the more you're actually cutting the protein down. The more you add sugar and sweeteners and honey and maple syrup and white flour, and the start you add processed foods, and you're just taking the protein out of your diet. So much so, in fact, when I analyzed the Nutritarian diet that I recommend that contains these high protein plant foods, I found that the protein content of the plant-based Nutritarian diet was higher than those eating the meat-based diet in the study, comparing more or less osteoporosis in the meat-based diet versus the vegan diet, which was sometimes an intermediate amount of protein. The vegan Nutritarian diet had more protein because how does it have more protein than a person eating meat and dairy products and eggs? Well, because when they're eating meat and dairy products and eggs, they're eating so much excess calories from oil and bread and white flour and other types of empty calorie foods that weren't supplying adequate protein. And because almost everything we're eating, the vegetables, the beans, the intact whole grains, and the nuts and seeds, all are high in protein. The overall effect of the whole diet was the protein content was actually higher than those on the meat-based diet. And the calcium content was double compared to the vegan diet that wasn't so carefully designed, by the way.
There are, of course, a certain number of essential amino acids, and some people wonder whether plant-based eaters may struggle to get some of them, like lysine or methionine in particular. Do you think that is ever a concern that would warrant any additional attention beyond just getting enough protein from healthy foods?
Yes, I think that is a concern in about 1 in 20 to 1 in 50 people. It's not lysine and methionine, by the way. And I've done blood work on vegans, extensive blood work for the last 35 years, and the amino acid in the protein panels that are most often low are taurine, the most frequent amino acid. So we only do those panels when people aren't thriving or don't feel that they are reaching their optimal level of physical fitness and strength, and then we test for those levels, and we find that in rare cases, usually it's not 19 out of 20 or 30 people who aren't going to have that issue. But some people, especially as they age, do better with a little extra taurine, and it would be more rare that they would need lysine or methionine. It would be even more rare than 1 in 50 people. So we're talking about the need for amino acid, a little extra protein, and you can use that extra protein from usually from hemp seeds or from a pea protein, hemp protein mix, or pumpkin protein. They can do that, and they can just take a little extra, not much. They could just take a little extra taurine, like 500 milligrams, if they're one of those people not thriving on a vegan diet and on a person who needs more protein utilization. So it's most people don't have that issue, but for those that do, then taurine is the number one amino acid that helps.
I'm curious if you can tell us about the Nutritarian approach. You coined that term, of course, and have popularized it and brought it into the world. What does it mean, and why is it important?
Well, I think the word nutritarian is an important word, and I think it's a good, because obviously there's lots of types of plant-based diets you can eat, just like, lots of food you can choose to eat. And people, and obviously processed food is plant-based too, but your diet could be like a macrobiotic diet of mostly rice, or it could be a fruitarian diet of mostly fruit. But a nutritarian diet defines the diet as it being nutrient rich, being vegetable based, getting its fats not from oils and animal fats, but from nuts and seeds, and from obviously eating a wide variety of natural unprocessed plant foods, organic when possible. So it tries to develop a gold standard of nutritional excellence that people should strive for by defining what's the optimal way to eat a plant-based diet. And when they recognize what's optimal, then they can choose how close they want to strive to that, right? But at least we should agree on what's optimal, and say, well, certainly it's better to eat. And I'm claiming that we are a vegetable-dependent animal, that our immune system and the growth of the intraepithelial lymphocytes that surround the villi of the small intestines aren't maximally function unless you're exposed to a wide amount of vegetable compounds, including the isothiocyanates that are found in green cruciferous vegetables. So I'm saying, and obviously even lettuce I consider a superfood, because lettuce has almost no oxalic acid. All its calcium and minerals are bioavailable, including zinc. It doesn't bind minerals, and it's also the richest source of sulfoquinavose, which is a major fuel for the growth of healthy bacteria in the gut. So we're talking here about eating raw vegetables, chewing them well, eating cooked vegetables. So we're talking about a nutritarian diet, combining raw and cooked, having a wide variety of food types. There's a little bit of, and even though I feature the G-bombs, which feature foods with a lot of scientific support for lifespan enhancement and protection against cancer, it doesn't mean I expect people to eat only G-bombs. I'm just reminding them to eat their G-bombs every day. I'm not saying they can't also have things that aren't G-bombs, like a butternut squash or beets and carrots that are not in the G-bomb category, or intact amaranth or intact whole grains, or jicama and kohlrabi, whatever we're talking here. But what I'm saying is we're trying people, and fresh fruit like that isn't a berry. We want people to eat a wide variety of food. Even the WHEEL study, the Women's Healthy Eating and Living study, showed that those women who ate vegetables lived the longest. And the more vegetables they eat, the longer they lived, and the more protection they had of cancer, because part of the WHEEL study was looking at women who had cancer and seeing how long they lived. But people who ate fruits and vegetables had better outcome than people who just ate vegetables without fruit. People who eat a plant-based diet without nuts and seeds don't live as long. Their all-cause mortality is reduced, and their cardiovascular mortality is reduced. It's a big mistake. We don't just throw out a whole section of food out the window. And so we're talking here about increasing the variety of natural foods we're eating, not decreasing the variety and throwing out foods as being the enemy if they're a whole natural food. And by the way, eating, you can say primitive foods and wild foods are also really super good for us. So we see there's like wild purslane growing all over the place, in the garden, the forest. There's wild dill, and there's all types of food growing all over the place that we can just pick right off the ground. And when we're eating foods that are growing in natural habitats like that, there's hundreds of years of leaves and organic debris and insects and decaying organic matter, and we're eating food with a full amount of symphony of nutrients as nature intended. So yes. So a nutritarian diet is striving for the best diet you can possibly achieve in your habitat. If so the best you can possibly do. Can you grow? For me, a nutritarian diet maybe involves growing some of my own food and making compost piles. And for another person, they can't do that, but they're doing the very best they can do. So we're taking away this idea of recreating with food in a self-destructive manner. Why should an emotionally and physically healthy person want to get pleasure from food that's going to destroy their own well-being and mental and physical health? And the answer is, if your taste buds acclimate and you learn how to make the healthy recipes and you're emotionally and physically healthy, you should like the foods that like you back. You should like the foods that taste the best. The foods that you like to eat and you enjoy the most and you want to eat should also be the ones that are good for you. And that's what we're trying to achieve on a Nutritarian diet. We're striving for that, to do the best we can.
You talked about G bombs earlier, and I'd like to go a little deeper on that. Can you tell us about the G bombs, and let's go over their benefits briefly?
Well, let's go over G-BOMBS, G-B-O-M-B-S, greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. And I've identified these 6 foods of having so many hundreds of scientific studies documenting their benefits, especially prevention against cancer. So, and the benefits are so profound that are absolutely shocking, that stun the researchers doing the projects, stun them. And I'm stunned by them. That's why I do it, because, you know, we could throw a dart at any food, but, you know, even berries and berry extracts and berry powders have been shown to reverse precancerous lesions and to reverse cancer. And, you know, the anthocyanins and the proanthocyanins and bioflavonoids in berries, or their absorption is inhibited if you have banana at the same meal. So berries are important, and we shouldn't put berries in a banana-based smoothie because of the compound in bananas that could slow and compete with the absorption of those anti-cancer substances in berries. So that's why we tell people in the morning, have a little intact whole grain, like amaranth or teft or steel-cut oats or something, with a cup of berries. And you can put a little other fruit like citrus fruit or something, but with a heaping teaspoon of flax seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds with a plant milk on it, with an unsweetened plant milk. That's a typical breakfast, right? Because you got your seeds in and you got your berries in, and you didn't mix it with banana or date, which could interfere with the absorption of these beneficial compounds from the berries. And so we're talking about the benefits of mushrooms and beans, and we're scoring foods on a hierarchical scale of quality based on, like, let's take carbohydrates on a hierarchical scale of quality. Which carbohydrates have the most anti-cancer materials, like inositol pentachous phosphate, which prevents cancer cells from replicating, and incites, which is the most immune system supported, which has the lowest glycemic load of all carbohydrates, which has the most slowly digestible carbohydrates, and the most resistant starch, which fuel the growth of beneficial bacteria in the gut, which then slow the absorption of all of the glycemic load of all foods. And what I'm saying is that beans and lentils and peas are a step above other carbohydrates. And beans and lentils in particular, including soybeans, have so much lifespan enhancing and anti-cancer benefits, and make you feel satisfied with less calories because they take so long to digest, and are rich in protein. And all the carbohydrates aren't all absorbable. They pass through into the toilet bowl. And if all the carbohydrates aren't absorbable in a high protein bean, that means the protein of the bean is even higher than you would think, because all the carbohydrates are not fully absorbed. So the amount of calories that really are absorbed means the beans are even higher in protein than you would have thought. So yes, beans have been shown to extend lifespan in a radical fashion and to prevent cancer. So you can eat. So on a person who's on a diet where they're calorically restricted because they're not, let's say they want to lose weight, they're not as physically active, we choose to give them more of their carbohydrate from beans and less of their carbohydrate from, let's say, rice or potato or grains, because beans are just more lifespan favorable. And for those of us who can eat, who have more caloric needs because of a physical activity or bigger people, we can eat different types of carbohydrate sources. We want to make sure a major source of our carbohydrate, or the major carbohydrate source, comes from beans or legumes. You can still have some others, but they're not the major carbohydrate source. Beans are still our major carbohydrate source. And likewise, the G, the B, right, the greens, the beans. The greens encourage people to recognize that we're trying to eat raw green vegetables and cooked green vegetables. And these longevity studies on hundreds of thousands of people documenting what food has the largest effect on extending human lifespan. The answer is green vegetables with no threshold effect, which means that mushrooms have a threshold, because once you're eating a half a cup of mushroom, probably eating a whole cup's not going to give you more benefit. But once you're eating a half a cup of chopped raw onion or scallion, eating a whole cup or 2 cups is not going to add more benefit. But that's not the same thing with green vegetables. With green vegetables, you go from 1 cup to 2 cups to 3 cups to 4 cups a day. You still get, in studies, enhancement in lifespan and more centenarians in those studies. And so we're saying a mix of different type of green vegetables, different ways of inputting green vegetables, both raw and cooked and partially cooked, different type, both cruciferous and non-cruciferous green vegetables. So we're going after a variety of green vegetables, different types, both cooked and non-cooked, and eating more of them in our diet as a source of total calories in a nutritarian diet.
Wonderful.
Now, I didn't go into too much detail on mushrooms and onions, but let me just say that mushrooms are the most powerful anti-angiogenic food. Remember we talked about at the beginning on pro-angiogenesis of sugar-containing foods? Well, mushrooms have anti-fat storage effects and anti-estrogenic effects and anti-cancer growth effects. They don't let abnormal cells proliferate. And they supply substances that increase the immune system's recognition of abnormal cells. They allow the immune system to identify cell surfaces that have become sickly so the cell can be removed and destroyed before it can turn into a cancer cell. So mushrooms are magical. They're a magical food, and they should be a regular food. And it's not just one mushroom. On a nutritarian diet, we're trying to increase the variety of different types of mushrooms we eat. So like black forest mushrooms. And so I'm encouraging people, spend the extra money on getting a wide variety of organic mushrooms, because they don't weigh very much, and you could even just a little bit, inclusion of that little bit has tremendous beneficial lifespan promoting effects, and as do onions and scallions, and particularly when you eat scallions raw and red onion raw to flavor a dish. I'll make a cooked vegetable dish, like California cream kale, with a thickened garlicky tomato sauce on top, and then I'll splash on the top some either chopped red onion or chopped scallion raw to mix in with the cooked kale and the cooked tomato sauce and stuff, which has dramatic beneficial effects on longevity and lifespan. So we can construct a diet to have an extra degree of protection, and we can idealize the diet in utilizing a wide variety of these beneficial foods. And G-BOMBS encourages people to recognize those foods and include them in their daily diet.
For somebody who is eating a healthy diet, are there still some supplements that you recommend they consider taking? And if so, can you tell us about that?
Certainly. I'm grateful for the obviously experience I've had, and I'm lucky to have cared for large numbers of people from the vegan communities, from almost 40 years ago. So in many, because I've been in medical practice as a primary care physician for decades, where I'm actually seeing patients all day long and all night and all weekends. I had a large patient load of vegans. And what I'm saying is the problems they developed over time and in later life were not merely due to B12 deficiency. Many that I've been encountered over those decades of caring for elderly vegans were people with neurologic deficits, particularly both dementia and Parkinson's disease. So I feel it's critically important to make sure the omega-3 index is optimized, because we know from numerous studies, and I should say this carefully, that every study that looks at brain size or cognitive impairment against the omega-3 index over time find that a low omega-3 index can increase the risk of cognitive impairment and brain shrinkage with aging. And we know that omega-3 protects the brain against inflammation and susceptibility to toxic chemical compounds. So it's not just B12. I'm also a stickler to make sure people are also protecting their brain, because if you're going to follow a nutritarian diet and push the envelope of human longevity and live between 95 and 105 years old, because I say the natural lifespan for humans is between 97 and 107 years old. And if we're going to push that lifespan to that age range, then we want to protect our brains to live with us that long, to live healthfully to that later age. So maybe it's not that important for a person who's going to not take care of their health and pass away at the lifespan most Americans do, between 75 and 80. But for us people living longer, we want to make sure our brain's with us and have a full brain function as we age. So it's important to make sure we have an adequate omega-3 index throughout middle ages and later ages to make sure we don't have decades of brain shrinkage that starts to occur when we're younger, not only in our last 2 decades of life, if don't have adequate omega-3. And so the big three are B12, long-chain omega-3 like DHA and EPA, which are available from vegan sources, and zinc. Because zinc also is not as absorbable from plants as it is from animal products, because the phytates bind zinc. And we know there's too much evidence from scientific studies that taking a little extra zinc has beneficial effects on immunosenescence and neurological senescence. What I mean, let me define those words for a minute, because we're saying that it's natural for the immune system to age and be less effective as we approach 100 years old, increasing our risk of developing pneumonia or other infections that can cause death. And it's natural for our muscles to get weaker, our bones to get weaker, our brain to get weaker, our immune system to get weaker. That's part of the process of aging. And the studies show that the idealizing the zinc level, which is a little more than what you get from a vegan diet, is better to resist immunosenescence, less prostate cancer, less breast cancer, less neurologic deficits, less dementia when you have more zinc adequacy with aging. So the big three are B12, DHA, EPA, and zinc. And there's other accessory nutrients that are helpful for some people and more so that are not, like iodine, vitamin D, K2, taurine, things that are more, that probably some people get enough sunshine, they don't need vitamin D. Some people are eating seaweed and kelp, they don't need the iodine. Some people, so we don't produce enough K2 in their gut. But still, we usually supplement appropriately with some of those nutrients that some people benefit from, which is not as consistent as the three I'm most concerned about. You know what I mean?
Let's talk about EPA and DHA a little deeper for a second. As of our recording this interview, there were studies published fairly recently showing rancidity in fish oil to be very widespread. As I understand it, the researchers included algae-based sources of EPA and DHA in their study. They sort of captured it under the blanket of fish oil for some reason. But apparently, up to half of the fish oil, again, including algae in the mix to some extent, that they were looking at was rancid, which reduced or eliminated its benefits in terms of health in the body. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this and what somebody can do to ensure, if they are going to consume supplemental EPA or DHA, that it's safe and fresh.
That's an important question you're asking, because I don't know whether it was 20 years ago or 25 years ago where I found that to be the case, because I noticed that when I started to see these, I was caring for elderly members of the American Natural Hygiene Society and the American Vegan Society, and some of them were developing neurologic problems, and I was checking their levels for the omega-3 index, finding it to be super low and wanting people to take supplements. And I found that some people complained of burping, bad taste, bad smell from some of these both the vegan and the non-vegan, the fish-based supplements, and I sent them to a lab to analyze the TBA scores, the rancidity scores. And I found that to see what I could do to protect against this. And I found that as the supplements were out of the refrigerator and at room temperature for 4 months, they started to get more higher degrees of rancidity. And as they were out of the refrigerator for 9 months and 12 months and 15 months, the more they were kept from their date of manufacturing at room temperature, the rancidity increased. So then, and I know I usually don't talk about this because I don't want to, promote myself in the supplements I make available or sell, because I started to develop a supplement because I needed to, for my community, to develop a supplement with low rancidity scores. So I had the people who make the vegan oil pack ours in dark glass and ship it to us in refrigerated trucks, and we kept it under refrigeration. So when a person orders it, it was a fresh-based oil. So that's one of my contributions I've done to the community, to be able to have, and because I'm doing them in smaller quantities, because we're packing it in glass, because we have refrigerated trucks and refrigerated refrigerated in our warehouse, it makes the product more expensive. But we're Nutritarians, wanting to do whatever we can to idealize it. You don't need to take that much, and we can take the level, adjust it to the blood test, the omega-3 index, to make sure we're taking the right amount. So I'm doing all those things to maximize the effect, the benefits for people who follow my guidelines. But yes, I'm concerned that if you're using a less expensive, whether it's fish oil or a other vegan source, then the date of manufacturing matters. Because the more months you're away from the date of manufacturing, a product on the shelf of a Costco or a shelf of a supermarket for a year, it's probably going to have more acidity than the one that was manufactured a month or two ago.
Another topic, Joel, of frequent controversy is lectins. Can you tell us a bit about Dr. Stephen Gundry's thesis and your opinions on the topic of lectins and whether it's something people should be paying attention to?
You know, I'm trying to shy away from this idea of when one person has a way out idea that's so far out from the rest of the nutritional scientists in the world, the hundreds of thousands of us, that we should give this person such a high degree of because they're able to get popularity and sell books or get notoriety. It's bad science. It's not supported by nutritional research. It's actually disingenuous. It's not an honest interpretation of the science because you have to literally twist the data to make that seem real. Because we know that beans are associated with longevity, and even the consumption of lectins are associated with lower rates of cancer, and they have beneficial effects, not negative effects. Now, that doesn't mean that some people can't be allergic or sensitive to certain types of lectins in foods. We know that's the case, but that means we're designing a diet for a person's individual idiosyncratic, allergies or whatever, or sensitivities. It doesn't mean we blanketly have a negative effect on, say that beans are bad or tomatoes are bad or, or nuts are bad, like that person has done. So it's the same thing where a person says, well, debate the carnivore people. Well, why don't I just debate people who are saying the earth is flat? Why should we give these people a voice when what they're claiming is so far away from the amount of preponderance of evidence, from you recognizing the good work of hundreds of thousands of nutritional scientists who devote their life to producing research and putting out good information, studying people for decades and controlling for risk factors and controlling for confounding variables and doing a fine and expanding the efficacy and science of the nutritional science. And we can't just give too much, effort and attention to crazy way out thinkers that are just wild theories with no scientific basis to support them. Just like we see the same thing in politics no matter how much of the public embraces these craziness, we still crazy. You know what I mean?
All that said, tell us about lectins. What is the truth about lectins?
Lectins are a food that they sometimes call them an anti-nutrient like phytates. But don't forget, the body utilizes these things as phytochemicals. In other words, what I'm saying is the way phytochemicals worked is that sometimes they're an anti-nutrient. Sometimes these things actually can stress a cell like exercise stresses a cell. When you exercise, you cause stress, but the body builds back stronger again as a result of that stress. It's the same thing with lectins. Lectins are phytochemicals that have some effect on cells to make them build back more natural antioxidant and anti-free radical protection of that cell. And even can have the effect to cause building back to activate osteoblasts to strengthen bones. So we have these substances in nature, and if we isolate them and concentrate them, they could have negative effects, yes. Or if we just eat that one food, but if we take them in the form that nature intended, in low levels, and a variety of them, not a concentration of one type, but a wide exposure to a wide amount of different types, the body benefits from them and gets benefit, not hurt from it. It's the same thing as if we took the anti-cancer isothiocyanates out of broccoli and cabbage and kale and said, look, when people are taking indole 3-carbinol or sulforaphane or DIM, they have a negative effect of taking so much of that. So why are you telling them to eat more broccoli? Well, when they eat the vegetables, they get a leveled amount of them in various types in a symphony, balanced symphony. We're not extracting it and getting a concentrated amount of one dose, like taking beta-carotene as opposed to the 50 different carotenoids you get in the symphony of carotenoids in natural foods. We get the best delivery from food. We get the best, but when we get it from food, these nutrients, which could be damaging in an isolated form, are safe. But don't forget, some people have taken that theory and saying, yeah, look at beta carotene and vitamin A. If you take those, they're dangerous. We should only get our nutrients from food. We should not use any supplements. Well, that's wrong too. That's not thinking logically or scientific. Yes, there are some nutrients that are better gotten from food, but there's also some nutrients that don't come in an array of a matrix that, like zinc, or like that is better that we benefit from supplementally, especially if we're like B12. If we're low in it, we don't have to get the B12 from a food source. So we can't, just because it's correct to get the majority of our nutrients from food, doesn't mean that follows that everything we take should come from food. And we shouldn't use any supplement, all supplements are bad. So it's extremism on both sides. And there are some people in the vegan community that have that degree of extremism that are, I think, that are in some degree hurting or getting people afraid to take any supplements, and in doing so are causing these nutritional deficiencies, can lead to later life weaknesses.
One other topic of some controversy is goitrogens, and particularly their effect on thyroid function. Are some people with compromised thyroid function better off, to some extent, limiting intake of goitrogenic foods?
I also think that's not true. That because if you're eating a diet with a variety of foods, the level of goitrogen is too low to negatively affect the thyroid. You would have to have extracted the juice of the bok choy or the green vegetable, of the cruciferous vegetable, because that has the strongest or the cruciferous vegetables have the most. So you'd have to overjuice it or eat nothing but a diet that contains largely that. And nobody's advocating eat a diet of all cruciferous vegetables. There's almost no recorded data in the scientific literature of any effect on suppression of thyroid in humans in people who have a varied diet, including the goitrogenic vegetables. It just does not occur. So the answer is absolutely not. But a person should not be eating a diet that's so imbalanced, or like eating an all fruit diet, or an all nut diet, or an all rice diet, or an all potato diet, or an all veg green and all. So you can't just eat. You're just not getting a good variety. So then you have more potential for risk. Like, for example, there's cadmium in flax seeds. We shouldn't be eating a cup of flax seeds a day, but we should be eating a variety of different types of seeds: flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds. We don't just take one because a little bit of good. We don't take a huge amount. We got a cup of flax seeds every day. That's more omega-3. Well, that's not a good idea, because there's natural occurring toxins in foods. And if you take too much of one food, you can create certain imbalances. So no, there's no general concern, and people with thyroid disease should not be avoiding soy or green vegetables to have an anti-goitrogenic effect. It's not going to help them. It's just going to shorten their lifespan. They should eat a wide variety of food.
Joel, in closing here, I want to ask if you can leave our audience with one inspirational thought about why the pursuit of health is a worthy endeavor.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that question too, because I'm adamant that the pursuit of health and the love of good health makes us feel happier, not just healthier, but makes us feel satisfied, less fear in our life, more gratitude, more optimism. It gives us the ability to enjoy our golden years and not be fearful and live in fear of the medical profession and medical interventions and being sickly. So it's so profoundly beneficial to our health to be in control of our health destiny and to live without fear and live with, abundant, excitement and passion for life. It doesn't just make us healthier. It makes us profoundly happier and more peaceful and be able to enjoy our life more fully.
We've been talking with Dr. Joel Fuhrman, president of the Nutritional Research Foundation and New York Times bestselling author of 7 fabulous books. Joel, thank you so much for your lifetime of dedication to helping us optimize our health, for the millions of lives you've changed and inspired. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for joining us today, and for your partnership in the food revolution.
You are welcome, and much gratitude and thanks to you, Ocean, and all you're doing to help people as well. I think we both are on the same passion, are so passionate about trying to get this message out to the betterment of others, and so glad what you're doing too. So good luck to all of you, and best of health.